The end of the Hawaii Energy Conference is nearly here. Please welcome moderator Alex DeRoode and his panel as they discuss deploying utility-scale renewable energy projects across the Hawaiian Islands.
Aloha, everybody. We're going to be taking you on a little tour of the state here, visiting a few different islands and discussing some of the nuances that our various islands are taking in approaching the transition to clean energy in our different communities. So very happy to be here as the closing panel. Very honored to be here with this group of colleagues here for this closing panel. It's great to have that little stretch session before getting into the last one here. So I hope you all enjoyed that too. I do want to remind the audience to please use the Q&A function on our platform here. If you have any questions, we will be taking some time towards the end of our panel session here to cover as many questions as we can. So I'd like to quickly introduce our speakers, and then we're going to be having a little one-on-one discussion with each of our speakers, and then following that up with a group discussion and some audience Q&A. So with me here today, I have Mike Kaleikini, who's the Senior Director for Hawaiian Affairs at ORMAT. Welcome, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
I'm also joined by Matthew Shields, offshore wind engineer with the National Wind Technology Center over at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, also known as NREL.
Hey,
aloha, Matthew. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm also joined by David Bissell, President and CEO of Kauai Island Utility Cooperative, or KIUC.
Aloha.
Aloha, David. And last but certainly not least, I'm joined here by Todd Yamashita, President of Oahu Energy Cooperative on Molokai. Aloha, Todd.
Hello, everybody.
So we have a great group here gathered today and an interesting discussion coming up. I'll just provide a little context first, specifically for Maui Island. I'll just mention that there's a great acceleration going on right now throughout our state, but particular to Maui Island, we have over 177 megawatts of planned renewable energy projects, utility scale projects, here over the next 3 to 4 years. That it also includes 200 megawatts of battery storage to go along with that planned renewable energy. And we're looking at a retirement of our Kahului power plant planned for, I believe we're at 2024 is the latest date that I had heard. And slowly, or actually not slowly, but quickly transitioning to that 100% clean energy goal that we're all racing towards. So I do want to mention that Mayor Victorino is very supportive of our renewable energy efforts here, as well as happy that we can support the Hawaii Energy Conference. The county's been a long-time supporter of this conference. You can all see how much, really important information it brings to all of our stakeholders here in the state as well as beyond our state. And so wanted to convey that message as well as thank the Hawaii Energy Conference Planning Committee. So with that, let's start with you, Mike. We're just going to have a few questions regarding some of the work that you're involved in as Senior Director for Hawaiian Affairs at ORMAT. The first question I'll ask you is if you could please describe how utility-scale geothermal projects in Hawaii can be developed in a way that addresses sometimes sensitive cultural cultural sensitivities around the use of this resource. And I'll just frame that a little bit to describe that as in your role with ORMAT, you're helping in the management of the Puna Geothermal Venture project over on Big Island.
Yep. Okay, Alex, thank you. Great question. First off, though, I just want to clarify something. So my title is Senior Director, Hawaii Affairs. Yeah. So sometimes you put the AN, some folks can think that I'm the cultural person, but I'm not. And then that's a great question. You're talking about cultural sensitivities with regards to utility scale geothermal, and I'll start off by saying, in general, that all projects in Hawaii go through these sensitivities that's related to cultural aspects, right? Regardless, but what I'll share with everyone that for geothermal, what we have done, we have actually engaged with cultural practitioners who are experts in this area on the cultural side, and we have actually developed protocols for us here at Puna Geothermal Venture. And some of the major points of these protocols really is about, because it's geothermal, it's about appreciation, it's about honor and recognizing and respecting the elemental nature of geothermal, which is from the cultural aspect, pele honua mea, pele. And so we do what you see other projects do. You do blessings and you do offerings and gifts, and you make sure you share appreciation and respect for what's about to be whatever activities in terms of developing a project. So we've done that. We do that. A key component of the cultural sensitivities, which, by the way, there are many ways to address them. This is the way we have been doing it. And part of that, the big thing is reciprocity. So not just take natural resources, but what can you do to give back, right? And in our application, geothermal, the technology in itself has a form of reciprocity whereby the heat that comes up, utilized to generate electricity, is then rerouted back into the earth to heat back up. So it's like giving back the fluids and appreciating the heat energy that we were able to use to generate electricity, right? So that's one aspect, but other aspects really is about, if we're using this heat, if we use an area that is disturbed, then what can we do, right, to replace that? Whether it's with plants that thrived in the area, we bring up this liquid. One thing that is very part of the reciprocity process is like planting trees that will take the water back in, replenish the groundwater. So we do all of that, and the key again is really about honoring, recognizing, and respect for the natural elements of the geothermal resource.
Thank you for that answer, Michael.
Yeah.
So Puna Geothermal is the only utility scale geothermal project in the state of Hawaii at the moment. What do you think of the possibilities of geothermal projects being developed on other islands, and why do you feel like there haven't been any others developed to date other than Puna Geothermal?
Well, the state has done surveys throughout the islands of Hawaii, and my understanding is that there is potential on Oahu, off the Hawaiian Islands coast, Lualuale area. There's also potential, and that's from the Waianae volcano, right? And also in at the Mokapu area, that's another volcano there. And the reason why volcanoes are important is because in Hawaii, the geothermal resource relies on the heat from the volcanoes, right? So that's the location there on Oahu. There's a few locations on Maui, of Haleakala, and also on Molokai. But the further north that one goes on the Hawaii Island chain, the less likely of finding a really viable resource. And that's why on the Big Island in Puna, at the southern part of the island, because of the very active volcano Kilauea and of course Mauna Loa, the success or the ability to have a viable resource exists. And so we've been here since 1993, and really some of the challenges in developing or looking for a resource on Oahu or Maui is finding folks that are willing to do that. Yeah, it takes time, it costs, You have to do all of the requirements on the cultural side, environmental permitting, etc. There is a potential. It's just that we're looking for folks that are willing to go out there and explore.
Great. So I'll ask this last question for our one-on-one here
Okay.
as a two-part. One is we're aware that there's been a proposal submitted to the PUC for expansion and improvement of the current Tuna geothermal facility. And we're also aware that in 2018, you guys had a pretty big scare with lava flow coming very close to your facility and had to shut down operations for a certain period of time. If you could speak to both of those aspects of the operation.
Okay, I'll speak to the eruption. Yeah, it started on May 3rd, 2018. It's just stuck in our memories here. But we shut down. The eruption was a little bit south of us primarily. It did circle us, engulfed us around on our perimeter. Equipment-wise, we had 3 geothermal wells that were covered. Some of our equipment for drilling was covered, and the electrical substation was covered. Yeah, so those were the primary major equipment that was affected. We were able to come back on site at the end of 2018. We built a road, and from then till now, we have refurbished, restored equipment. So our contract with Hawaii Electric on the Hawaii Island is for 38 megawatts. We are currently back at 25 megawatts. And we've been online since November of 2020. So from May 2018 to November 2020, we're offline. Super happy that we're back online. Super happy that and appreciative that the resource we got here to be able to come back online from something like that. And that's one thing just to just touch on that is that it'd be for further geothermal development. The best options would be to separate it to different parts of the islands in case if next time there's an eruption, it minimizes the impacts to the supply. So that's on the on the eruption. We work closely with the county, the mayor, HEMA, on the emergency response. I think our guys did a great job on response on that. Our emergency response plan was activated and implemented. So that's the general gist on that. With regards to our proposal at the PUC, we negotiated with Hawaiian Electric a proposed repowering project or an amended and restated power purchase agreement, which was submitted by Hawaiian Electric in December of 2019. And the overview, the key elements of this proposal consists of converting all of our pricing to a fixed price, and our energy rates will be between 4 and 7 cents per kilowatt hour. We would also consolidate. We have 2 power purchase agreements. We'll consolidate it into one single power purchase agreement, and then the terms of the proposal, the repowering of the facility, would go out to 2052. The existing power purchase agreement will terminate at the end of December. 2027 at the end of December, unless a new proposal takes its place. Yeah. And then the final piece is that we would install modern generating equipment that is much greater efficiency and will result in an increase of 8 megawatts. So the resource that we are using today for the 38 megawatts will be the same resource that we'll use for the 46 megawatt proposal, the repowering project. It's just that it'll be 3 larger units compared to today's generating units, which consists of 12 separate units. The new footprint would be smaller than the existing footprint of the 12 units. There will be less rotating equipment, less noise generation because of the reduction in rotating equipment, and the piping and connection will be substantially reduced, which will also result in less potential for geothermal emissions to the atmosphere. So in general, that's what we're proposing. It's at the PUC right now under their consideration, and we're crossing our fingers that hopefully we get a favorable decision soon.
Thank you, Michael. Well, lots
Yeah.
going on. You haven't been resting. You've been
No.
busy, sounds like. So I'd like to turn it over to Matthew Shields with NREL next. And Matthew, maybe you could start by just describing to our audience NREL's role and focus with regard to offshore wind energy industry, which is what we're going to be speaking about specifically in our conversation here, is offshore wind energy.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Alex. So NREL, or the National Renewable Energy Lab, is one of 17 national labs operated by the Department of Energy. We focus exclusively on all forms of renewable energy, of which offshore wind is one subset of that, of course. We really focus on the applied research, so kind of bridging the gap between like fundamental science and the industrial partners or people who are actually building and installing projects. We ourselves do not build projects. We don't cite projects, but we look at how these projects could be developed at lower risk, lower cost, lower impact to stakeholders. We're technology agnostic, so we consider all sorts of technologies and all sorts of ways that projects can be built. And we try to be forward-looking and try to understand what is the way that offshore wind and other generation sources can fit into the nation's energy portfolio over the next couple of decades. My personal role is that I lead the work that we do for offshore wind techno-economic analysis, so understanding technology and market trends. And I'm leading a study we're currently doing to look at what offshore wind could look like around the island of Oahu.
Great. So on that note, several of us are familiar with the Oahu offshore wind cost study that you're involved in and that you just mentioned. Still ongoing. I believe that the final report hasn't been completely approved or released yet. Some question around that, some questions you might be able to help us answer. How's the study being funded? Who requested the study? Who commissioned it? And who's involved in this research that you're conducting?
So the study was, I think, conceptualized by the Hawaiian State Energy Office and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM. So the State Energy Office is trying to understand how and if offshore wind can play a role in the clean energy targets set by Hawaii. And BOEM is the group that controls the federal leasing areas of federal waters. And they funded NREL to do these type of cost studies for California and Oregon in the past, as well as some other projects on the East Coast as well. So the concept and the scope has been developed in collaboration with the State Energy Office and BOEM. The goal of what we're trying to do is convey what likely technology or logistics or supply chain parameters might be used for offshore wind in Hawaii. It's not picking a specific project. It's not suggesting a location where a project would be built. It's really comparing how costs and feasibility would look throughout the entire region surrounding Oahu. We've been in close collaboration with the State Energy Office as well as Hawaiian Electric, the Hawaiian Department of Transportation. We've conducted some stakeholder outreach with the the Humpback Whales National Marine Sanctuary and some other groups as well. So we're really trying to reach out to quite a few stakeholders on Hawaii, leading up to a final report, which will be published this fall, as well as submitting some of our data to Hawaiian Electric and the State Energy Office to help with to provide information for future discussions on the energy portfolio on Oahu.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, there's so much we could cover here. I mean, each of these gentlemen we could be speaking for 40 minutes per topic here. But just to kind of wrap up on this one-on-one part of the conversation here. Here in Hawaii, we're not familiar with offshore wind. We have no offshore wind projects currently deployed. Specifically, what's being looked at or considered for Hawaii is floating offshore wind. And can you just speak to a little bit about what does that look like? What could that look like here in Hawaii? What are some of the considerations that various stakeholders who've had these types of projects in their neck of the woods have expressed? if you could share a little bit of that with all of us.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the global offshore wind industry is primarily fixed bottom, meaning that the turbines are rigidly connected to the seafloor. Less than 1% of turbines installed worldwide are floating. But in Hawaii, that would be the case because of the extreme water depths, as I'm sure everyone on the call is aware of. So that means that there's basically new technologies as well as new questions which face the industry as a whole. The technology's been coming along nicely, where there are some demonstration projects worldwide that show that it is feasible to put a wind turbine on a floating platform and anchor it to the seafloor using a mooring line and an anchor. And so I think from that perspective, it's realistic to build these floating wind projects. But a lot of questions exist about what are the supply chains, what are the logistics involved in building these different components, what is the impact on the environment or stakeholders, as well as just the view shed, like can you actually see these turbines from shore and so forth. Honestly, these are all ongoing research questions. There's a lot of mitigation plans in place to reduce the impact of these, to monitor wildlife, to site turbines away from common wildlife corridors, to avoid engage or interaction with fishing and other competing uses. I think one of the things that we've become very aware of as part of the Oahu cost study is how critical it would be for a project which would actually be built in Oahu to incorporate the local community on the Hawaiian Islands, to properly understand what are the cultural impacts, what are the environmental impacts. That's not something you can read in a book or understand from the mainland or from overseas. And it would be really important to have the Hawaiian voice at the table, as a project is developed. I would just close by saying there are still a lot of advantages to offshore wind, which are worth considering. The load profiles are really tailored to the time of the day when people are turning on lights and electricity after work. The wind blows strong and consistently at these times, particularly around Hawaii. The projects are sited far offshore, 20 or 30 kilometers away from the shore, so it's not directly in your line of sight, as you're on the beach. And it's a good opportunity to stand up local industry, local jobs, manufacturing, servicing the turbines, and so forth. So I think that there are quite a few benefits to offshore wind, which we'll be including in our report, along with some of the questions that are outstanding for the industry.
So a good balancing technology to balance out solar, for example, which provides power in the middle of the day typically, whereas these could provide some nighttime power.
Yep, that's exactly right. It's all part of the full generation profile, and they complement each other really nicely.
Great. Well, thank you, Matthew. I'll turn over to David Bissell now, and David, I thought we'd start off our conversation here. If you could, so the name of the organization that you're the president and CEO of is the Kauai Island Utility Cooperative. That word cooperative has quite a presence, right? It's a distinction compared to other islands across our state. If you could maybe speak a little bit to how has KIUC approached its transition, or is approaching its transition to 100% clean energy differently than other parts of the state? What are maybe some lessons learned or some best practices that you've found in your transition?
Thanks, Alex. Yes, first of all, we are a cooperative, which we're the only island served outside of the HEC chain, which is an investor-owned utility. We were formed in 2002, and one of our big differences, we have an elected board of directors who almost from the start in 2002 was pushing heavily for a transition to renewable. As recent as 2008, we were 92% fossil fuel supplied for our island. And the board came out and pretty early, right around that time, with a 50% renewable target. We were pretty unsure of how we'd do it at that time. A study had just been commissioned a few years earlier and ranked all the renewable options. And kind of interesting as we move forward, but PV was the least ranked of all the options. We don't have any geothermal resources here. We really don't have any developable wind resources because of endangered species side. We do have a biomass plant that's came online since then, and we've had some legacy hydro that was making up the roughly 8% renewable we had in 2008. But outside of that, we've really followed the PV transformation from fairly small utility scale projects. Our first one was a 1 megawatt PV field, no batteries on it. We followed that up with two 13 megawatt PV systems that again didn't have any batteries. Big chunk for our midday peak was somewhere around 60 to 70 megawatts at the time, so a very high percentage of variable energy came on our grid. So along with that and dealing with some of the problems that caused or could have caused, we started going pretty substantial with batteries. We've gone through really the life cycle of batteries from lead acid to the newest lithium batteries and the newest technologies. Well, right now we have, I think, about 60 megawatts of utility scale PV, and we have 60 megawatts of battery storage tied in with those PV systems. We can keep putting more and more batteries to further our renewable expansion. At the end of last year with all this, we hit 67% renewable. It was helped somewhat by the lower sales that pushed up the renewable percentage a little bit, but we've added a project since then. The PMRF solar and battery project has came online. So we think for this year, we'll be pushing above 60%, maybe as high as 65%. But the big journey for us has been batteries and storage technologies. We've been kind of a pioneer early on with it, and we're now still one of the leading grids as a percentage of batteries on our system. We can meet now probably 2/3 or more of our peak with the batteries that we have. So it's been a long, steady movement for our island, but as a co-op, like I say, it goes back to the original strategic plan that our board put into place. They've continued to push for renewables, and that really reflects the desires of our members. Our current target is 70% by 2030, which is 10 years earlier than the state target. We almost hit it last year, and we're confident we'll hit it going forward with some of the other projects we have in the works.
Great, David. That's impressive. So, some of the issues or challenges that utilities face with regards to intermittent renewables is grid stability. And you mentioned your early adoption and continued expansion in battery energy storage systems. What are some other techniques or approaches that KIUC has taken to deal with grid stability challenges, as well as saturation of intermittent renewables on various circuits?
Yeah, we haven't had really a circuit by circuit problem. On the distributed side, we've adopted an approach, we call it a right-sized approach to rooftop solar. And that's basically anybody can put a PV system on their home or business to offset their use, what's a reasonable offset of their own energy needs. If they go bigger than that, they have to either have a separate circuit put in where we can curtail the larger size of it using our AMI, advanced metering infrastructure system, or they have to have batteries. So as a cooperative, we haven't wanted to tell our member owners, you can't put in PV. So we've tried to say, well, let's work together, size it right, or come up with other solutions to help on a circuit by circuit basis, which so far has been pretty successful. Other items we've worked have been converting our biggest fossil fuel generating plant, our Kauai plant, to having a synchronous condenser capabilities where it can produce, have voltage support for our system using renewable generation, that the plant keeps running, the generators keeps functioning, but it's just pulling energy from our grid, renewable energy from our grid, and has a significant grid support capabilities from that legacy infrastructure. And where that's coming in is between the batteries, the synchronous condenser, and really hard work and dedication from a bunch of very smart engineers and partners. We're hitting 100% renewable almost every sunny day. Over the last couple of years, we've had thousands of hours where our grid is operated at 100% renewable. We've had a few hiccups here and there, which is going to happen when you're that out in front of the industry. But really, it's taken all of the technologies, the legacy technologies, very innovative inverter technology, base technology, bringing them all together to achieve that. And the next frontier for us is bulk storage. We've passed the point where we can bring on more PV and have any of it go to the grid during the daytime. And we really need to store everything that comes online. So we're looking at bulk storage, which the technology we're focusing on and are well into development on is pump storage hydro on the west side, where instead of having 4 or 5 hours of storage, we can have 12 hours plus storage every day in a financially viable means. Storage, to get to 100% storage is going to be the key, particularly when you're on an island like us where the sun is going to be our predominant resource.
So I see that Todd is having some technology challenges there with internet connection. He's coming back though. Okay, Todd, we're gonna thank you, David. We'll come back to all of you as a group here if we have some time, if we can keep Todd on, but he's in and out. Todd, are you there? No. Okay, we lost him again. Well, one question then while we wait for Todd to come back, David, is you mentioned pump storage hydro, and one unique aspect about Kauai is it's one of the only locations in the state that has significant hydroelectric resource available. Big Island has a bit as well. But can you speak to how hydroelectric plays a role in your overall portfolio there with KIUC?
Yeah, Kauai has a long legacy of hydroelectric power back from the plantation days. We have, I think, 7 hydro units on the island, operating on the island now. They provide about 10% of our energy. It's good, stable energy source. And what's nice is that it gives us diversity from the sun. And when the sun's not shining, it tends to be because there's rain out there and we can get more hydroelectric generation. So it helps diversify us away from just solar-based energy. And also, particularly on our west side, there's using existing plantation ditches, plantation resources, we have the potential for a significant project of 20–25% of our energy source using legacy hydro, using legacy reservoirs, with updating them, putting them back into their 100% service levels for some of these reservoirs that are either empty now or very underutilized. There's thousands of feet of elevation change out there between the reservoirs, and we've got some existing hydro power out there that we can draw on to help cover some of the losses in efficiency caused by pumping. And the basis of it is a big solar field out on the Mana Plains on the far west side that will run pumps, push water uphill during the daytime. When we've got the 100% energy, we'll let it run back downhill during the nighttime and use that pent up storage, hydro storage, to help run our grid when the sun isn't shining or we can't use it because we've got saturation.
So it also helps with your grid stability, having that hydroelectric resource available. Yeah,
it does, and having the conventional generators or legacy moving generators tied in with hydro is helpful for our system because it gets us off where we're not 100% inverter based, which helps the stability of our grid.
Great. Well, I know we're still trying to get Todd back online here. He may just try to join us via audio if possible. I'll just mention a couple of interesting perspectives here. We just spoke to David, who is the head of a utility co-op, right? And Todd is the president of Oahu Energy Co-op for Molokai. And I think the word co-op is used, in different contexts, and can be a little confusing for people if they just hear the word co-op and they think it's a one-size-fits-all type of label or type of organization. So whereas David is and KIUC is a utility co-op, Todd is more of a consumer co-op model. So it's basically trying to aggregate consumers or find solutions that can serve consumers that become members or part of the co-op. David, maybe you could speak a little bit to how that differs from a utility co-op.
I think the big difference is scale. We have 30-some thousand members of our cooperative, and a cooperative can be very small, set up for a specific purpose. The key part is any co-op's going to follow cooperative principles of concern for their members, working in a nonprofit basis, sharing any of the gains amongst members to drive, if there is more profit or more income than their expenses, they share in that amongst their membership. And that really rolls from the smallest to the largest cooperatives. And there's huge cooperatives, non-utility cooperatives on the mainland that can have 1 million or more members, but they all share on the same basic cooperative principles.
Yeah, so that's I guess nuanced with, or somewhat in contrast to a shareholder-driven organization, right? Having kind of a different driver of the how you're developing projects and moving ahead.
Yeah, the big difference is a co-op's always going to be owned by and operated for their membership, from the small to the large. There's no other parties. Everybody that uses your product, no matter what it is, if it's a patron of the co-op, can be a member of the cooperative and share in the financial support of the cooperative and share in the financial benefits of it, where an investor-owned utility has outside shareholders in their organization structure that help provide the capital and help share in the profits of that enterprise.
So again, I wish Todd was able to join us here, because he would bring a rich perspective here to our conversation. I will say we heard from Leilani Chow earlier today on one of the Solar Coaster interviews, and she represents the Molokai Clean Energy Hui. They're doing great work engaging with community there and planning for future clean energy for the island of Molokai. The co-op, Koahu, is also doing really important work. A lot of folks that are involved with the co-op are also involved with the Molokai Clean Energy Hui, and I just encourage folks to go check it out. You can Oahu Energy Co-op. They have a website. You can go check it out, oahuenergy.coop. So if we unfortunately aren't able to get any words of wisdom from Todd today, at least you can, find information about them and reach out to Todd. We do have a question here from the audience for Dave, and the question is, how does Kauai's overall cost of energy to citizens differ from the rest of the state? The rest of the state being under an investor-owned utility model.
It depends on islands. We're more expensive than Oahu, but Oahu has about 10 times our sales level. We're either at par, a little higher, a little lower, depending on the relative price of oil. With the big island, it's 2 or 3 times our size, and usually we're right around what Maui is. The big thing for us is one of the smaller islands has been our ability to drive down the price differential from the investor-owned. When we were formed in 2002, we were, I think, almost 70% higher cost than Oahu, and we've been continuing to be able to drive down that differential to somewhere in the 10 to 20% range, depending on where the cost of oil is. It's a kind of counterintuitive, but the more renewables you have relative to the other islands in the low-cost oil atmosphere we've had the last few years, it ends up being a disadvantage in the short term. But we're confident that the high renewables will help us stay stable on our rates to our members and also fare well against the other islands over time. We're not where we want to be yet, but we keep moving and keep trying to get our rates stable and lower all the time through cost control and good investments.
Well, thank you. I do want to thank our speakers. We are unfortunately running down to our last minute here. And I know, Todd, we're getting some furious texting going on here, just trying to troubleshoot. But I know he really wanted to be with all of us here today. And again, I encourage you to reach out to him directly. With that, thank you, everybody. And thank you to the audience for your questions. And we look forward to being in touch again. Aloha.
Mahalo to the panel. Please welcome back our hosts, Program Chair Doug McLeod and Vice Chair Frank DeRoode Jr. to close out this year's conference.
Aloha, and thank you. Would like to thank the panel today. Unfortunately, Todd was dropping in and out because of connection problems, but we're going to make sure that we get what he was going to share and make sure all the attendees will hear from Todd in some way, shape, or form. So the team's working on that right now in terms of how we're going to be able to do that. So, but we'd like to thank the panel. We'd like to thank the moderator as well. And Doug, that was a very interesting panel, getting an idea of what was going on, throughout the state.
Well, it is. I mean, there's a lot going on. I'm glad people could hear. And Kauai is a totally different perspective. But before we move on, you mentioned our team, and I think that we should just take a moment. Some people don't realize what really goes in, gets involved and what's behind the scenes on these programs. So I want to just take a moment, and I'm going to ask our camera crew, who we also owe a big thank you to just pan around the room and show the team that's been working on this for the last 2 days.
This is not a Zoom call.
So thank you, Doug. I would like to individually recognize the members of our team. First of all, we'll thank you for being our conference chair for so many years and providing leadership, thought leadership. Of course, our vice chair, Frank DeRoode Jr., thank you. You're seeing the back end of this production, which is truly a professional production. Sandy Ryan is our conference chair, her team, Annette Lynch, Amber Hardwick, Leilani Ventura, and helping them out from other MEDB staff members are Jessica Salva and Lavelle Brito. They have worked tirelessly for months. We're greatly appreciative of their work. And it's exciting to say that our 8th annual Hawaii Energy Conference is a wrap, but we have some other things that we want to do in our closing moments with you. So, Frank?
Actually, this is up to you.
All right.
And then we're going to go back to us and we'll end.
Okay. Yes. So as I noted, sitting to my left here is Doug McLeod, who has been our conference chair for 7 of those 8 years, or all 8 of those, all eight of those years. I didn't know we were so formal in the first year. It was an organizing year, but I'm corrected, all 8 years. His thought leadership has been amazing. His knowledge base globally, nationally, as well as at home in Hawaii has been exceptional and has greatly informed the kind of dialogue and discourse that we've been able to bring to this conference. And I think that has been the North Star, is to keep it a dialogue, discourse of many different opinions coming together to advance our clean energy goals. So as a small token of our appreciation, we have a little paddle that we hope that you will have a place on your shelf. that memorializes your time as conference chair with our heartfelt mahalo and gratitude. Thank you so much. Everyone joins in the applause.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes, if I remember correctly, you were Energy Commissioner at the time and took the lead on putting together the program. So
many years ago.
Many years ago. Yes, I had all brown hair, I think then. Yeah. So.
And some.
Yeah. Thanks to all of you. Yeah.
So.
Do you have some other closing items? Though?
So we got some closing items. First of all, we'd like to thank the County of Maui.
Yes.
For all the support they've given us. The program committee for their hard work and designing an informative and engaging program. I think that they just did an excellent job in terms of getting the right people, sending the right message. What did you think, Doug?
Absolutely. I mean, it's easy to it's easy in hindsight to look at these things and say, oh, we should have covered this or that. But if you really go around, we had a decent mix. We had several countries, you know, we have several different states, and we really had some different perspectives. You heard a lot too about community and how you really, you know, people aren't going to be able to get away with going through the motions or checking a box. I mean, if you want a new utility scale project in the islands, you know, it's clear now that the path to that involves an awful lot of consultation and listening.
Yeah, I think what we saw today is that when you actually do reach out to the community, that they respond in spades in terms of giving of their time, in terms of sharing their mana'o and opinions, and being there in terms of the discussion. So we've heard a lot today about the community and letting the community in. We'll heed those words and making sure that as we continue the conference, that these voices continue to be heard going forward. I also want to add Doug's and Leslie's thanks for the grit and determination, literally, of our staff in terms of executing all the details related to putting on the conference. And Doug, thank you for having that little circle, and Leslie, because this is not a Zoom call. I keep telling everybody that this is not a Zoom call. You just don't pop in and, you know, say hello and goodbye. It's that there's a lot of preparation and a lot of details that need to be taken care of in terms of logistics, onboarding speakers, making sure everybody is able to, you know, be at least a participant in this. Not but last, but at last, but not least, our sponsors and exhibitors who supported our efforts this year. They were very, very good. These platforms are not cheap, as we understand, and a lot of the things that we do have costs, and we have some very dedicated sponsors who help us with those costs, and we like to thank them as well. So I guess that's it for us this year. We want to thank the attendees for joining us and wish everyone a safe and productive rest of the year, while we look forward to the next time we can be together for the 9th annual Hawaii Energy Conference in person. Hopefully without these. Okay? So aloha, ahui ho, and let's give them the shaka. Mahalo.